Shalom. Thank you for joining me on this. Now I'm in Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 16. This is a part of the Sermon on the Mount, and this section is about fasting. Remember, the whole theme of the Sermon on the Mount is that our righteousness as followers of Jesus has to exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees. Their righteousness was based on their external obedience to rules and regulations. Jesus is teaching us in the Sermon on the Mount that if we're going to be a follower of his, then our righteousness has to come from our heart, not from just our external obedience to rules and regulations. And so here is Jesus talking about the subject of fasting. And these are his words, beginning in verse 16. When you fast, do not look somber, as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Fascinating. Public versus private. I think that's interesting. Public versus private. So there's different kinds of fasting. There's medical reasons to fast. Some of us have mental health reasons for fasting. Sometimes we just want to quiet ourselves down, get away from things, that sort of thing. Some people go through a traumatic experience and they lose their appetite, so they fast. Some people go through mourning. They have some great loss. Someone they love have died. Maybe they've lost their home or their job or their income, something. They've lost their health maybe, and they've lost their appetite along with it. There's a fast along with that. Some people fast so that they can learn how to get in touch with and control their physical appetites, their impulses, hunger, sexual impulses, shopping. They want to get things under control, food impulses, so forth, things like that. They want to get things under control. There's individual fasting for that. And there's corporate fasting, where groups of us get together, or a whole church or a whole group gets together and chooses to fast for X number of days and to pray and consider what's going on, and then come together afterwards and eat a meal and talk about the fast. The main thing that Jesus is talking about here is fasting for spiritual purposes. You want to become closer to God. You want to take your body's desires and bring them more under control so that you can be much closer to God, much more obedient to the Lord. And he's saying when you go through this fasting period, you do it secretly so that people don't know that you're fasting. Unless, of course, you've agreed to do corporate fasting with other people. That's a different story. You know, like a whole church, we're going to do 30 days of fasting or 10 days of fasting or something like that. That's a little bit different. But when you're talking about individual fasting, you know, there were some people in Jesus' day that would fast, and they would make sure everybody knew they were fasting. You know, they would just look miserable. They'd look somber, and they'd remind everybody, you know, I'm fasting. You know, I'm just fasting right now. Well, that's not what Jesus is saying you do. If you really want to come close to him, and you really want to bring your physical desires and your spiritual life into alignment with God, then your fasting is done in secret. Nobody else will know you're fasting. And that's what he says. When your Father who sees that, he will reward you. He will, literally, it's that Greek word again, he will pay you back. So that's what Jesus teaches about fasting. So you have to ask yourself, what's your motive for fasting? And what's the reward for fasting? If you're fasting the way you should be fasting, what do you think is your reward for that kind of fasting? Closeness to God? More control of your impulses? A deeper awareness of who God is? Lots of things can happen. Thanks for joining me.